Good morning to those of you just joining us, just waiting a couple of seconds while everybody who is in the waiting room is admitted, and then we will get underway. Okay, I think we should start as we have a packed agenda for you this afternoon. Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to this online conference on Bridging the Gap, Empowering Young People's Transition to Work and Civic Participation, organised by StartNet, the European Policy Centre, and Connecting Europe. As we celebrate 7 years of StartNet, the network Transition Education to Work, and look ahead to the future at the closing of the European Year of Skills and ahead of the European elections in June. My name is Jackie Davis. I will have the privilege of moderating our discussions in plenary this afternoon. During the plenary sessions, if you would like to join the panel discussion with a question or a comment, please can you do so in the interest of time, because we don't have very long for that conversation. Could you please do so in writing? In the chat, click on the chat button and you can pose the question. Also happy to receive your comments. Just ask that you are very brief so I can see at a glance what your question is, who it is for, or indeed what your comment is. During the breakout sessions, you will have a chance. We will ask you to have your cameras on and activate your mics and play a very active part in those discussions. They're very much interacting sessions for all of you. It's just in the plenaries, in the interest of time, we're sticking to written questions. If you would like to send messages out via social media about what we're discussing, and we do urge you to do so to get those messages out about what we need to do to support young people in their transition to work, please use the hashtags transition to work and European Year of Skills. And I should also mention we have a graphic artist with us today, the wonderful Christopher Malapitan. We're going to have a look at he's going to be trying to capture in visual form the essence of our discussions. We're going to take a look at what he's done from time to time, and you will receive a copy of that graphic by email after the event so you can share it with your networks. And again, we would be delighted if you would do so. To get us underway, I am first delighted to give the floor to the two organisations who have supported this project and made it possible. First, I'd like to hear from Dr. Elke Kaschl, Regional Director, Southwest Europe and Delegate for European Affairs at the Goethe-Institut. Dr. Kaschl, it is great to have you with us. Over to you to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Also a big hello to everyone who has joined us from my side. Dear László, Andor, Vânia, Neto, Natalia, Kallio, Paolo, Nardi, and Tommaso, Grossi. A big hello to all speakers, all participants. Again, thank you so much for being with us today in this digital room. It's really my pleasure and honor to welcome you on behalf of the Goethe-Institut to this very special event today, the closing conference of StartNet, the project done with Connecting Europe today and the European Policy Council. And as was said, I think it's the right moment. It's the closing of the European Year of Skills. It's right before the European Parliament elections. So again, I think it's the perfect moment to take stock and discuss a topic that is so important and dear to us, meaning the education of young people and their transition to the labor market. Over the past 7 years, StartNet, network transition from education to work, has been at the forefront of building bridges for youth. And this was possible, and really let me say thank you. This was possible because of the partnership that we from the side of the Goethe-Institut have with Stiftung Mercator. Thank you, Stiftung Mercator, for this close, trustworthy, and very powerful partnership that that you have engaged in during the past 7 years. Again, we've built bridges over the past 7 years, bridges between education and work for teachers, students, parents, employers, trade unions, chambers of commerce and industry in southern Italy and all across Europe, co-creating actions for career guidance, entrepreneurship, internships, and much more. We have also built bridges between countries via learning mobilities and Erasmus partnerships, focusing on skills for the future and the green and digital transition. And finally, over the past 7 years, we have also built bridges between policy and practice. Just like today, aiming to transfer experience from the ground to enhance policies and programs, together with commissioners, MEPs, experts, researchers, practitioners, and of course, young people. These issues are very important to us at the Goethe-Institut. Worldwide, the Goethe-Institut is working closely with more than 120,000 schools, empowering young people and civil society stakeholders across the world, especially in the fields of language, education, and cultural work, transmitting skills needed to navigate the increasingly complex world today and keep up with technological and environmental change. StartNet is a prime example of our long-term commitment to these issues, and we are really proud of the lasting impact that StartNet can show for via numerous projects, positive evaluations, valuable feedback, via the multiplication of our findings through European networks, as well as, and maybe most importantly, via extraordinary partnerships, many of whom are gathered here with us today in this digital room. I really want to say thank you for being at our side, for your shared commitment and your passion for young people and their future. And I would also really like to say thank you, ein großes Dankeschön to the StartNet team in Italy and in Brussels for your outstanding work behind the scenes. A big thank you to Victoria Buller, Rafael Deschka, Jan Wilka, Stella Wirth, and Perla Zanini. Without you, the journey of these past 7 years, I don't think would ever have been possible. As you may know, StartNet in its current form will conclude at the end of this month. Yet other initiatives, networks, ongoing and future partnerships will carry on the legacy and ensure the lasting impact. And in this vein, I really wish us today a successful bridge building conference that will hopefully contribute to this legacy and inspire future action. So again, thank you to all of you. And with this, I hand back to you, Jacki.
Thank you very much indeed, Elke. And as you say, we're continuing there to build those bridges through our discussion today. And we'll talk about how we build on the legacy of StartNet to date as we look to the future. Magdalena Kircher, Director of Europe at the Stiftung Mercator, couldn't be with us today, but she did want to speak to you, so she recorded a video message. Let's hear what she has to say.
Dear Dr. Kaschl, Mohni, dear colleagues and friends, dear participants. My name is Magdalena Kirchner. I am the Director for Europe in the World at the Stiftung Mercator. And although I cannot join you today, I'm happy to be able to say a few words of welcome and especially gratitude to everyone involved with bridging the gap, empowering young people's transition to work and civic participation, at least virtually. It is because of the commitment, the creativity and energy of the StartNet team and our colleagues at the Goethe-Institut that at Stiftung Mercator we can look back today at so many years of fruitful collaboration and many achievements. Thank you for this. We started our cooperation with the aim to empower youth in a critical period of their lives, the transition from education to work. We knew back then, and we all know now, that in the past years, this transition has definitely not become easier, and every support and opportunity for exchange is needed to give youth the perspective and the power to participate. Since 2017, StartNet established not only a thriving project platform in Italy, in 2 regions of the country alone, 250,000 students could be reached, a huge success. It also built a growing European network of political and civil society stakeholders, of entrepreneurs and educational actors. Members of this network learned from each other, building a path to employment and towards a more stable and united European society. StartNet addresses the urgent need for action and provides practical tools and support for people affected. But it also needs allies, not only, but particularly in the European Parliament and the Commission, as we will hear more about in a few moments. The project serves as an important reminder to all of us that youth unemployment poses a multidimensional threat to the economy, but also to a democratic and active civil society. Let me congratulate and thank StartNet and all of those involved today again for ongoing dedication to reducing youth unemployment and to strengthen civic participation. To all of you today, great discussions and a successful and inspiring conference.
So Magdalena Kirchner there reminding us just how much is at stake with this issue when she talked about that multi-dimensional threat from youth unemployment. Both speakers highlighting very much StartNet's key role in building those bridges and partnerships that we've heard are so important to tackle these issues. We're going to come back on that later on, but first we're going to hear more from Jan Wilke from StartNet about the highlights and achievements of the past 7 years. Jan.
Thank you so much, Jacki. It's going to be a challenge to capture all the highlights, so we can just give a few examples. And maybe we can start with actually asking the question, what is StartNet? And there are multiple answers to that question. StartNet, firstly, of course, is a project, as we said, initiated between Stiftung Mercator and the Goethe-Institut to help young people's transition, locally in Italy, as well as at the European level. But it's also about networks. It's about a local network that really gets together all the stakeholders relevant for young people's transition, as well as a European network that exchanges good practices and builds partnerships for joint solutions. It's a family of projects, which means that there are various sub-projects, operational actions dedicated to young people's transition, and they complement and reinforce each other. It's a system and a chain of action from primary to middle and secondary education, post-secondary education, and labor market integration. Different actions that link up and make sure that young people don't drop out, that they have continuous support in their transition, in their educational and vocational pathway. It's an approach, the approach of collective impact, which means that we want to gather all the relevant stakeholders for young people's transition, from the labor market, the education sector, the parents, the young people themselves, and make sure that they all work together on this, jointly designing and implementing solutions for young people's transitions. It's a bridge between education and work, narrowing the gap between the labor market that is in so fast evolution with technological changes and the education sector, trying to help young people not to fall in the gap, but also bridges across countries, as was mentioned. So it's a connector, an enabler for the different levels. It's also a provider of research, capacity building, and advocacy. So we are doing publications, we are empowering our partners, we are gathering the expertise and bring it up to the European policy level in order to improve the policies and programs aiming for young people's transition to the labor market. A few highlights, milestones on our journey that reflect the diversity of our action. So initiated in 2017 at the local and at the European level, StartNet then quickly builds a European network of similar dedicated initiatives cooperating across borders. We do an increasing number of events to share and build knowledge on the topic, hosting events with MEPs, with commissioners. We joined the European Alliance of Apprenticeships and, for example, host a plenary session at the European Youth event in front of thousands of young people. We also managed to create a number of European partnerships. The first one to mention would be Skills for Life, that is focused on early career guidance, followed by Wake Up Your Vocation, dedicated to skills for the future, and Parcours for the Future, a little bit a playful way of providing career guidance to young people with regard to competence for the green and digital transition. Overall, StartNet has hosted 84 events like the event today, digitally, online and offline, with 16,000 participants. We provided 38 advocacy actions. That includes, for example, campaigns as on internships, amendments in legislative processes, such as on the new Erasmus, the European Social Fund, or the Youth Guarantee, as well as regular contributions to EU consultations. Overall, StartNet has realized 6 Erasmus projects with a total budget of 1.6 million euro, thereby multiplying the funding, the initial funding provided by Stiftung Mercator. And actually 4 more projects are in the pipeline. So it really shows the opportunity and the strengths of the network, with a success rate of 100% so far. We are also proud of a very positive external evaluation that highlights a few specific aspects, such as the local impact in Puglia and Basilicata region. In the last 3 years only, 15,000 students were reached and 600 teachers. The strong partners and networks, the effective knowledge transfer and bridge building between the sectors, but also between the European and the local level. The fact that StartNet creates models that are replicable and scalable. So whatever project and action is created in one region can be used in another region, making it a modular and very easy to use approach for young people's transition. And also to mention a couple of challenges, because the work in such a field, of course, is not all rosy. A huge challenge was the COVID-19 pandemic, but we managed rather swiftly to provide digital solutions, tailor-made solutions, tutoring, individual online courses for career guidance and specific projects, European webinars to share practices around the topic. So managing really to quickly react to new circumstances where schools were struggling a lot and needed also some support. Another element of a challenge that finally we managed to overcome regards youth participation. From the beginning of the project, we wanted that young people are not on the menu, but have a seat at the table. They should have a say, PSA as partners in the project. It was initially rather difficult to engage the young people, but throughout a dedicated process, having an empowering weekend, having a group of young people that are motivated and engaged, that engage their peers, that do workshops, a manifesto, finally register as an NGO, join the governance of StartNet, and now participate in European projects. We are truly proud to have such a good practice at the Italian, but also European level. Today, StartNet has 19 partners from 12 countries, and we realized that the situations, the circumstances in which we operate, of course, are very different, but often the challenges are similar and the solutions are pretty much the same. So there's a lot of good practices and partnerships potential across borders in Europe. And we do so with a very dedicated learning agenda, focusing on key aspects that we judge fundamental for young people's transition to the labor market. These include the social inclusion and leaving no one behind. It's about empowering young people and making them a project partner. It's about getting involved all the relevant stakeholders with young people at the core. It's about providing continuous early career guidance throughout the education and vocational journey. It's about focusing on young people's skills for the future, trying to make that education can catch up with the evolution out there in life and the labor market, or even anticipate what are the skills for the green and digital transition to come. To tap into the potential of VET and apprenticeships as a superb tool of labor market integration. empowering young people through a broader approach on entrepreneurship education, and addressing also new burning challenges such as skills shortages and mismatches through European partnerships and collaborations. The event today is another highlight of this journey of StartNet. So we are really delighted to make good practices spread, to share and engage with the different stakeholders, to bring our expertise from local to European level in view of the elections. You will be able to discuss much more of what has been presented so far in the different breakout rooms later on, and probably some of the topics will echo also in the plenary discussions. Thank you so much so far.
Thank you very much indeed, Jan, and we'll come back on a lot of those points you've raised, and consider you pointed to some of the lessons of what really works and what doesn't, something I'd like to come back to in our panel later on. But first, I'm delighted to give the floor to László Andor, former European Commissioner for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, and now Secretary General of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, otherwise known as FEPS. László, great to have you with us. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Jackie, for welcoming me. And indeed, I thank EPC for the invitation. I would like to start by congratulating StartNet for the excellent work that has just been presented. It's really an immense list of activities. And I think it's hugely important that Goethe-Institut as well as Stiftung Mercator have been supporting this endeavor. I think it's also important that in the title we find the word empowerment. Indeed, young people should not be lectured, they should be empowered to make choices, to make social investment for themselves, investment in their own skills and knowledge, to lay down the foundations of a successful career. And when, if not now, at the time of the European Parliament election, this topic should be raised. I think among many others, this should be one of the crucial themes in the run-up to the EP elections on which we should quiz the candidates. They should indeed commit to promoting young people's education, work opportunities, and the transition between the two. I suppose I was invited to deliver this keynote speech because of my earlier work on the Youth Guarantee, on which I would like to elaborate a little bit, even if it's a matter of the past. But I think if we don't learn from the experience of the previous crisis, then we are not going to prepare well enough for the next stage, including the possibility of future crisis as well. As you know, over 10 years ago, the European Youth Guarantee was introduced to ensure that young people who leave school or become unemployed for some reason, they would receive a quality offer within 4 months after leaving school or becoming unemployed. When we spoke about young people, this was defined as those under 25. And the quality offer was to be either a proper job or a further learning opportunity or an apprenticeship or a traineeship. That was the definition. Was it a silver bullet? My answer is almost. It was very, very crucial, rather effective, of course, depending on the quality and the capacity of the implementation in different countries, in different regions, through different institutions, by the help of different social partners. But overall, indeed, the popularity, but also the durability of the concept proves that this was indeed the right idea at the right time. And indeed, after the introduction of the European Youth Guarantee Scheme, together with some additional financial support from the European Union budget, after 2014, indeed, the youth unemployment, but also the number of needs started to decline. Now, if you ask economists or statisticians, of course, they would say that if the macro conditions improve, it's also easier to prove the value of the micro interventions, use guarantee being a micro level intervention. Nevertheless, I think it should not be doubted that this was a major addition to what we call the European social model. But this was not the only policy innovation at the time in the interest of the young people. Let me just highlight, and this is relevant for today's discussion, that the Europe 2020 strategy, which was introduced in 2010, had a numerical target to reduce early school leaving. And this was also very, very important to ensure that less than 10% of the youngsters would leave education too early. Why? Because it's in the school where young people can learn the foundations of a successful life, but also starting with a successful entry to the labor market. It was also proposed at the time to double the resources of Erasmus, and not simply because Erasmus is one of the most popular policies of the European Union, but also because at this level of the integration, the labor markets are also integrated. And if we open up the European labor market to young people, we can make it easier to find a job, perhaps in another country where the opportunities or the institutions are better than at the home. So there was a strong emphasis on mobility as part of the solution. But at this point, of course, we need to stress that mobility is not a sole or a unique solution, even if there are great imbalances in Europe. Let me just highlight that the former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta recently delivered an interesting report on the single market, when he is stressing not just the right to be mobile, but also the right to stay and benefit from prosperity in places where you live. But indeed, the youth guarantee came in addition to all the previously mentioned points, the target to reduce early school leaving, increasing Erasmus. And the usefulness of this concept was also proven at the time of the COVID crisis, because Commissioner Schmidt, at the time of the COVID, managed to boost the EU scheme for a youth guarantee. Now, what we learned in the meantime, just a few points. First of all, that unemployment is a cyclical phenomenon in the economy, but youth unemployment is even more cyclical. So if the number of unemployed people is increasing, the youth is always at a greater risk, even if the institutions helping public employment services function better in certain places. So the risk of becoming neat, especially with the migrant background, for example, is always growing at the time of the recessions. And the damage which unemployment can do to a young person is always greater than the average damage from the experience of unemployment. So this is one of the reasons why it needs to be taken very, very seriously. Some countries manage to generate the so-called inspiring practices. And I noted in the program there will be a discussion on such inspiring practices. In those times, the pioneers were countries like Austria and Finland, but also in terms of quality public employment services, the Netherlands had very advanced solutions from which others could learn. Now, is everything solved now? Obviously, far from it, right? There is still a lot to be done, and we should not just sit on the laurels of the previous cycles. I would like to close by listing 3 issues which would still deserve attention and scrutiny in order to ensure that there is some more policy innovation, improvement in the coming period. The number one point is that at the time of the COVID-19, when everything shifted online, including office work, but also schooling, we spotted a certain damage in terms of the quality of the education. So it's excellent that there were online solutions, but we also learned that this is also second best as compared to the real quality schooling. So let's be attentive to this. Let's exploit the opportunities of digitalization as a supplement to the way to organize education, but not a substitute. This is very, very important. The second point is that inspired by the success of the concept of youth guarantee, the last 5 years saw the promotion of a child guarantee going down in terms of age. Why? Because we know that the life chances are already determined when somebody is 4 or 5, and if the preschooling is not provided at good quality and accessibility, then the polarization of society can start too early, and the doors of social mobility would close too early. This is, I think, a valid point. At the same time, especially because we are talking now as a closing of the European Year on Skills, we should also stress that the acquisition of skills should not end with the end of schooling, but it's a lifelong agenda, right? So we should always be open as long as we are on the labor market, as long as we work, or as long as we are alive, to learn new skills and participate in various forms of formal or informal education. And the third point is that I think young people need to be taught, the sooner the better it is, that work is not simply just something through which we earn money. I think people need to be educated about the meaning of a vocation, that work actually also defines our role in society and our relations with other people. So that's also why, from the point of view of integration and social cohesion, what we speak about and what you discuss in the subsequent panels is going to be hugely important. So therefore, I look forward to listening to the next panel, and I wish you a very good discussion for the rest of the day.
Thank you so much indeed, László, for very much underlining not just what has been achieved, and you were part of that, as you talked about earlier, but also you said there is still much to be done, and you've highlighted those key areas of concern for you. I'd like to discuss those with our panel as we try to chart the way forward, because as we heard right at the beginning, you know, we still do have consistently high rates of young people not in education, employment or training. We have dropping out of education, still a major channel, skills mismatches, shortage. And as we heard from Magdalena, a very multidimensional threat. So you pointed to some of the issues that we need to address in order to tackle that in the forthcoming EU legislative cycle. Lots to discuss. Thank you again, László. We're always very grateful to have you with us. So what can we learn as we turn to our panel on European policy and practice? What can we learn about the challenges that remain? Do our panel share those that László identified? Would they identify others? What can we learn from those achievements we heard, the StartNet achievements in supporting young people at this critical phase in their lives as they make that transition to the world of work? And what does this mean, not just in terms of the future priorities for decision makers as we approach the European elections? And I want to come back on that appeal that we heard for pushing this issue during the election campaigns. But what are the priorities, therefore, for policymakers, but also for practitioners, the people like those involved in this project, the many of you joining us today, and for young people themselves? Very struck by what László said about, you know, it's about empowering young people, not lecturing them. So What does all this mean? Joining me to discuss this, I am delighted to welcome our esteemed panel this afternoon. We have with us Vânia Neto MEP, a member of the European Parliament's Industry, Research and Energy Committee, and crucially for this discussion this afternoon, hugely experienced in this area as a previous Future Skills Programme Manager and Education Skills and Learning Lead for Microsoft. So it is great to have you with us, Vânia, to bring both that industry perspective and the policymaker's perspective. Thank you so much for joining us at a very busy moment in the parliamentary schedule. Massimiliano Mascherini, head of the Social Policy Research Unit at Eurofound, the EU agency for the improvement of living and working conditions. Great to have Massimiliano with us. I'm hoping he will magically appear on my screen in just a moment. Natalia Kallio, board member at the European Youth Forum. We also have Paolo Nardi, director of the European Forum of Technical and Vocational Education, FNET, which among other things has been a coordinator of one of the StartNet network projects. Paolo, great to have you with us. I see also Natalia with us now, and Tommaso Grossi, policy analyst at the European Policy Centre. I understand that Massimiliano cannot join us today. Apologies, I was not updated on that, but we have a wonderful panel here today and lots to discuss. A reminder to all of you, if you have a comment or question to what you are hearing, please put it in the chat and please be brief so we can squeeze as many of you in as possible. But let us jump straight into the discussion now. So as we heard, panel, let me start with you, Vânia. This a critical moment. We're coming to the end of the European Year of Skills. We are coming to the European elections at a moment when more young people, hopefully, will vote than ever before, not least because in 5 member states, the voting age has been lowered. What is your assessment of the progress that we've made to date in supporting these vital transitions, this critical moment in young people's lives? And how do you see the challenge ahead? Because László said, we've achieved some things, but there's a lot more to be done. What's your assessment, where we are and what lies ahead?
Well, I think we've gone very, very far away. And I think that for now, young people in Europe do have fantastic support. They have opportunities that really can challenge their lives and also open up new worlds, like, for example, Erasmus and other opportunities that really are unique to Europe. But there's still, I think, a long way to go. And of course, I think that's why we are all here. We second László's opinion on this. That's still a lot to do. And I think one of the biggest challenges will be going forward, especially now that we are in the end of the legislature and then going to a new one, is that we need to support countries. And we need to make sure that the countries come together to really make sure that education and training keep up with the pace, not only of economy, social challenges, but also technology, which is really disrupting the way we interact with each other. So I think this fast pace of change in terms of technology, the way that companies are managed, and of course, what this means regarding upskilling and reskilling is the major, I think it's one of the biggest challenges for the next years to come. And I think that countries need to come together, and European Union has probably to have a bit more weight on this area.
Let's come back on that and what role the EU can play later on. And crucially, whether the building of bridges, that fundamental aspect of the StartNet approach, really can help us here in terms of that move, keeping pace, as you say, with fast change. Let me get a perspective from Natalia here, from the European Youth Forum, in terms of how well we're doing, where we are now, Natalia, and how you see the challenge ahead.
Yes, thanks a lot for the question, and hello everyone, and thank you for having me here today as well on this event. But getting back to your question, basically, like, one of the main areas and priorities for the European Youth Forum has been its campaign to ban the unpaid internship, which we also got a directive from the Commission this year. And that has been a big change for us as well, and for the young people of Europe, that we got some support, and as we have got all the way along from the European Parliament. And now we really look forward to see how it will be implemented and what kind of a loopholes there will be after the implementation. But I think we could definitely see changes. I really appreciate how today we have already mentioned the young people who are out of the training and out of the work and out of the education, and how also the COVID-19 left a mark on especially young people and their mental health and their education as well. So there has already been many topics, and I also would like to appreciate the mentioning of the youth guarantee and its new implementations, how it's affecting now also young people who are under 30 years old. So there's definitely good practices that are implemented and good changes, but there's still a lot to do. And I really hope to see and work to see how the internship directive and the council recommendation proposal will be strengthened by the European Parliament and the councils, and really to make sure that there's no loophole when it comes to the practice of unpaid internships and apprenticeships. Also, a lot of the things that I really wish to see in the 5-year long time is that there's enough funding for young people, so that the multi-annual financial framework will continue to recognize the importance of a social cohesion and continue supporting the achievements of our Porto 23 targets. And also really to focus on mainstreaming youth, social and economic rights across the European pillar of social rights and guarantee the renewal of action plan. So there's really processes that we need to keep on going and have the high priority in the processes. Nothing will come and be done overnight, and it's an active process that we need to keep on going. I really appreciate the good work done, like I really appreciate today the StartNet and all the achievements and impact done.
Thank you very much. And you're already pointing there to some of the issues you think where the EU can make a difference, where it can play a key role. Love to come back on that in just a moment. But let's continue to build our picture of where we are in the challenge ahead. Paolo Nardi, from your perspective, would you agree with the assessment of progress? Lots of achievements, but a lot still to be done.
Definitely. First of all, thank you very much for this invitation. And please, let me thank Jan and the StartNet friends. I've been involved for many years in StartNet, and I really appreciate what you have been doing for many years. So back to the question, I think that what Mr. Andor was mentioning about the discovering the culture of work, the concept of work is crucial, is one of the main well, let's say, crucial point emerging from after this year of the skills. And for me, and I hope also for my colleagues in the education and training ecosystem, is first of all a question for the future. What do we understand in terms of concept of work when it comes to Generation Z, Generation Alpha? I think this is very important that we start asking this to ourselves in order to implement the right policies, the right measures. Also, after the year of the skills, I can say that another important issue related with this cultural work is that skills doesn't mean only technical skills, but also well-being, life skills. This is very important. So how much our educational systems are ready to prepare people in a holistic way, so integral way, not just technical. And then just the second point, I think, emerging from these last months, that also Mr. Andor was mentioning, the lifelong perspective, which means lifelong learning, but also lifelong guidance. So to what extent are we ready to support people, not just for a job, but for a career in the future? So here, I think that's continuous learning, micro-credentials are key for the future.
Lots to come back to. Tommaso, complete the picture in terms of where you think we are as we look ahead to the next 5 years. We'll come back later on what the priority should be in that next 5 years, but your assessment of where we are and the challenge ahead. Would you echo what we've heard about the challenges? Is there something you think is missing from our discussion so far?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Jacki, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
Perfectly.
Thank you also for inviting me. And yeah, thank you to the organizer of this very interesting conversation today. About your question, yes, the picture looks definitely rosier than a few years back, and there has been some progress made, especially for what concerns my area of expertise, so the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights, and especially the principles that deal with the issue of empowering the youth. And of course, if we look at the statistics, it's not so rosy. So my colleagues before me have just mentioned young people not in employment, education or training, and the figures are still quite high compared to the target of the pillars. I believe it's about 11.7% as of 2022 of young people not in education nor training. The headline target is 9%, so there is still a lot of work to be done. And in general, I also would like to re-emphasize that education is a competence of member states. So Europe has a limited role in providing the right guidelines. So it's a deeply political matter. Has to do a lot with governments and their priorities.
Thank you, Tommaso. But our panelists already pointed to things they think the EU can do within those limited competences to help move this forward. But I just wanted to pick up on that point you made about, yes, the picture is rosier, but you said when you look at the statistics, it's not all that rosy. And I just wondered what your assessment is. I mean, I've moderated debates on this topic for many years, and we've had so many EU initiatives ranging from the youth strategy itself, 2019 to 2027. We've had the skills agenda of 2016, the new European skills agenda of 2020. The European Social Fund work in this area, Erasmus Plus has been mentioned, all of the Youth Guarantee, all these initiatives. And yet we seem to still be struggling to make progress on some of the key issues we'll delve into, particularly in the breakouts later. Vânia, why do you think that is?
Well, I think that's a $1 million question because, to be honest, I think that there's a lot into it. There's not only one simple explanation. I would say one of the things that might explain this is that, of course, we are one union, but we have a lot of different realities in the countries, right? So in some countries, youth unemployment, the fact that young people are out of education and employment is bigger and more acute than in others, right? Where we do not have that problem as really a big one. But as a whole, in the European Union, it is. And there is a lot of things that we still need to do. And as I was mentioning, the countries need to come together and really, I think raise the bar to make sure that they, of course, they keep their own the power to define what is their education systems, how they build it, etc. But that we also come more together to make it more useful and easier for the students to choose to go and have education in whatever they want in Europe, for example, and have this freedom also to do education whenever they want. You can tell, yes, but they already do have that. They do, but still, again, if you are from a low-income background, it's more difficult for you to be able to do that. So there's still this, not leaving anyone behind that I think is the next mile that we need to go. And especially aligning a bit more education systems with reality. I think it was Paolo that was mentioning that. The fact that you do not only need the core knowledge or the core technical skills, you need to learn how to be a proper citizen, a human in this technical world, right? And as they say, in this verge of AI era, human skills will be more important than ever. So you cannot be teaching students as you were in the first industrial revolution. You need to teach people to think by themselves, create new things, and have critical thinking. I think this is what's probably the biggest mismatch at the moment.
Thank you very much. And these are some things we will come back to in our breakouts. But other thoughts in terms of why this is, to use a very English expression, such a hard nut to crack. Paolo, what do you think lies behind the scale of this challenge? And is it really, I'm thinking about that point you was making about aligning education systems and bringing it back to the lessons we learned from StartNet, this building of bridges. Is it about making these partnerships even more effective? What do we learn from experience to date?
just let me make a premise. We're talking about educational science, so it's a social. Sorry, we're talking about education, so it's a social science. So there is no magic wand or mathematical law which can make possible what we want. So we need to try. So going back to your suggestion, I think that what is important from the StartNet experience, for instance, is to highlight best practices. I think there are differences in different countries, as Vânia was mentioning. So let's start looking what has been working. And there are some interesting examples in Europe where these problems are, let's say, less problematic, or there are some solutions. I'm talking about, for instance, the Basque Country, or I'm talking about some experiences promoted by the European Commission, the Center of Vocational Excellence, where at local level, we have vet centers, companies, institutions cooperating in order to find inclusive, but also innovative solutions to skills gap or to upskilling and reskilling. So the fil rouge among the different solutions is that we have an ecosystemic approach. I think this is what is really interesting, that we start working together at local level, the main actor of the knowledge triangle. So companies, vocational training centers, research centers, but also institutions, to be honest. We need to work more in an ecosystem like it happens in the Center of Vocational Excellence, like it happens in the Basque Country, very good example. And I've seen in some of these examples, very interesting results. So just to mention very quickly two of them, in the StartNet experience in particular, I've seen a vocational training center, but also NGO, Fundación Gitanos, investing in digital skills with Roma people. And you have at the same time inclusion and upskilling. Or in Cometa project, where we have migrants who got a great training in the hospitality sector, filling a skills gap in the society.
So
interesting.
A multi-dimensional approach alongside what Jan called that collective impact approach,
Exactly.
The two things working together. Tommaso, your sense of why it's so difficult and what we can learn from the sort of initiatives that StartNet, the projects that StartNet has been involved in, a vast array of them, about where we go from here if we're really to improve the support for this transition.
Thank you, Jacki. Yeah, well, first of all, I'm listening about the findings of the StartNet. Today I had a look at the documents that were shared with me, and it's sounds a very successful experience. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing more about what worked and what ways forward for future projects of this kind. In my opinion, I will just probably echo what Paolo said. It's important to find the fil rouge between what works in bridging these kind of gaps. And for me, I would just point to the fact that there is probably a lack of consistency in providing harmonized frameworks for training and skilling and upskilling programs among young people. We currently don't have a sort of developed micro-credentials which enable accreditation for non-formal training framework. We also lack ways of harmonizing all the existing ways of, as Paolo said, producing knowledge and skills. Yeah. So that is one thing. And again, to go back to my point about being a mostly national matter. And I can also mention maybe a few successful experiments that I had the opportunity to witness from within. I was focusing on AI AI skills and digital skills in one of my recent research projects with the EPC. And there are some interesting experiments happening, for instance, in Finland, developed by the University of Helsinki, where sort of multi-dimensional open source free access and available in different languages programs are available for providing high school students with a set of AI skills. And these kind of experiments at national level, I hope it doesn't sound too much like a buzzword, are really best practices that should be shared with other member states.
Sure. Tommaso, so that very interesting in terms of those skills for the digital transition, but also wanted to bring back in that point that László made, one of his key concerns about, yes, digitalization offers a huge amount of opportunities in the learning space and for addressing these issues, but we cannot make it, the whole answer here. Do you also have a concern about that in terms of using the digital tools we have to help young people make this transition, but not making it the be all and end all, as it were?
Yeah, the main point for this about this is that we shouldn't empower future workers with the right skills, the most relevant skills, for instance, on AI, for the sake of helping them finding a good employment, a good job. We shouldn't empower them for helping them become better citizens, to be more familiar with technological developments, with all the things that happen around them. So for me, it's important to stress that we shouldn't empower young people just to make them better workers, but also to make them better citizens.
Indeed. If you have any questions, by the way, don't forget you can put them in the chat. Natalia, I deliberately left you till last on this one because I just wanted to come back on what you think lies behind how difficult this is to make progress on, and what we can learn from the progress we have made. Some of the really good achievements of the StartNet project. Is it for you, and I'm just wondering whether it links to this question of talking at young people, lecturing young people, or empowering them and engaging them and putting you and your members, the people you represent, at the heart of this process? Is that part of the problem, do you think? And if it is, how do we fix it? How do we genuinely empower rather than lecture you?
Definitely. And I think that's a very relevant point. Also what Vânia and Paolo were saying about that one of the most important thing is really coming together, making people to be in one room and literally talking to each other. I always said when it comes to policy or trying to make the change, there's a big difference between a policy that has been made for young people and policy that has been made by young people. So I really think the young people should be in all the rooms, in all the levels of different policies and creating the change. We as a youth forum has always been promoting the European Youth Test, which was also implemented in the Commission level now, and now it's being called Youth Check, which means that young people should be involved in all the levels when we are creating new policies, from the adoption to the brainstorming part, in order to ensure that whatever is the policy, and of course it has an affection on young people, we know what are the affections and how young people are seeing it. But I also think what Paolo was saying before, also regarding that we need to reform and rethink the concept of work. The whole concept of work is something that has changed over time, and how young people live in a completely different kind of a working culture at the moment. Young people are in the forefront of the precarious living and working conditions, meaning the platform work and all these kind of jobs and different platforms that we didn't have even 20 years ago. So the whole concept of work and where do we work and what do we do for living is completely shifted and changed. And I also think that's a relevant conversation that we need to be having with all of us on the table. And I also think that just one thing is to also to include the youth organizations, to young people to every step of the way, as they are the special experts. And also, of course, the different public employment services can also play a big role, and different other stakeholders. But I really think coming all together and just listening to each other it's something that we are missing, and we really we need to critically start doing it.
And has been very much part of the StartNet approach. Just a question that's coming from Christoph Schweiger, and I think it's actually interesting for you, Natalia, because you were talking about that change in the whole concept of work. And Christoph saying we seem to have shifted back from an employees market to an employers market again. There are young people with master's degrees who simply can't find jobs. He asked, are the old ways of making it still applicable today? I'm not quite sure what he means by that, but is that something, Natalia, that you think we need to should make us have a little bit of a rethink of where we are? Have you seen that shift back?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree that we can see that it's an employer's market, in the sense that we are still lacking for economic system that fits for young people or fits for people in general that invest on welfare. So I think definitely there's still a lot of things to do when it comes to in a bigger picture as well. But I also think that, for example, regarding to our research, it costs around 1,000 euros per month to do the unpaid internship in Europe, which means that most likely only the ones who have money to work for free, or who have families that can allow you to work for free, are the ones that are getting to those European positions and really stepping within their careers in an early age. So I think there's many barriers when it comes to making your career or finding your way in general. And I think it's all linked to this capitalist system. And I think Christopher's question is very realistic in the sense of what do we see today.
Thank you very much. And we were talking earlier, Vânia was talking earlier about keeping up with technological change. I think it's also keeping up with social changes and changes in the structure of our economy. All these things coming together, Vânia. But I wanted to come to you. We don't have very long left. And I wanted to ask you two questions. Number one, in terms of the role the EU can play, because as Tommaso reminded us earlier, EU limited powers in this area. Natalia mentioned, for example, the issue of funding. How do you see, and we pointed also to the issue of harmonization or lack of it, because it's a national competence. How do you see briefly the EU's role, and ahead of the European elections? And László said we should quiz the candidates. We need to press them on these issues. What are they going to do over the next 5 years? What do you think the message should be from policymakers, from politicians, to young people as they contemplate whether to vote and how to vote in those elections? So the role of the EU and the message to young people about why Europe matters in all of this, fairly briefly, if you would.
Okay, so first, the role of the EU. As I briefly said before, I think that we should have more, joint policies on this, and for sure, the member states should be willing to have a little bit less power, but more integration on these areas. And I think that's where we should go in the 5 years ahead, and is to make sure and to focus very much on this skills and upskilling, reskilling needs for Europe, especially as we look into what is happening in other geographies and how well we need to keep up with the pace and make sure that our people feel, useful, they feel fulfilled in their careers, they feel happy about what they're doing, and they feel the sense of purpose as well, which is very important. But I wanted to also touch base on the other point of what to say to young people. I think that Europe needs to hear more about young people, and have more voices of young people in the parliament. Unfortunately, we know that not many political parties have young people as elected members. So I think Natalia, European Youth Forum and others should push also a bit for that, because being here even for a short period, I do see that we do lack representation from young people in the parliament. And this is important. And so, of course, if young people are away from politics, they cannot be represented. So I think the message should be, you need to go and vote. You need to have your voice heard, and you need to push your local politicians to say what they're going to do. And this is the basic principle, of course, of democracy. But if you do not feel represented, you also tend not to feel very, much impelled to go and vote. So indeed, I think that we all need to have this message that youth is a priority for Europe. and the digital and green transition will be made with young people and for young people, not only by older people making decisions, but also listening to young people. I think this is very, very, very important, and I hope all parties and all members that come to the next parliament will have this in mind.
Indeed, and thank you for drawing attention to that participation, the participation of youth, civic participation, part of the title of our discussion this afternoon. Tommaso, your thoughts in terms of the role of the EU and the message to young voters as they contemplate whether to vote, because many feel quite disillusioned with politics. They're politically active, but not necessarily within the confines of traditional elections. How do you see that, briefly, if you would?
I see that in a very grim way, if I may say so, because I'm aware how much difficulties to attract young voters national level during election times. I speak from the experience of the country I know the best, Italy. At the European level, I see more that there is more interest maybe in wider EU issues than at national level. But I was having a look at manifestos that were published recently, and there is still, going back to the question that Christoph put in the box, not enough emphasis on the reasons why it is so difficult for people to find a job, for students to find a job, even if they have a master's degree or even more diplomas, and still too much emphasis on buzzwords, I would say, that put too much emphasis on the individual and on the systemic difficulties in finding a job. I would say that open, honest communications from the forces, the progressive forces that work towards labor market inclusion, especially for young people, should be mandatory, should be their priority.
In terms of the role of the EU, sorry to hurry you, but we don't have long.
Yep.
You talked about the limitations on what the EU can do. Is funding, European Social Fund, one of the key areas where the EU does support initiatives in this area? I mentioned a few of the others earlier, and so have some of our speakers. For you, in terms of the role of the EU moving forward, do you believe, is it in terms of providing the money, the exchanges of good practice? What is key? Very briefly, if you would.
Yes and no, or at least yes, but not just that. I would also point to the fact that there are some important files currently open in the current legislation that should be finalized in the next mandate. For instance, on quality traineeships, and that again is for me the heart of the matter. Is a political matter that requires political will and political action. And yes, funding is important. I myself took part in the impact assessment of the European Social Fund on individual learning accounts, and that is important, but also laws, directives, and political action.
Implement what you've already committed to,
yes,
and then look to the future.
Absolutely.
Paolo, just in terms of the role of the EU, if you would, and briefly, what more can it do? What more should it be doing?
Very quickly, first of all, invest not only in the European educational space, but also educational and training space. So giving a role also to education and training. And the way could be really investing in micro-credentials, in the system of micro-credentials. Second, international mobility is very, very important. And often, vocational education and training is a bit left behind in comparison with the education and higher education. So we need to support that also in international mobility. And then a final one, I really want to go back to what László Andor was mentioning at the beginning. Maybe we need a very big cultural campaign on work, and the sense of vocation inside work. This is something that really at European level could be done.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask you to pick one of those in a moment as a priority for the next 5 years. But before we do that, perhaps we could have a look at what Chris Malapitam has done so far, our wonderful graphic artist. If we could get, I think there are several images, so let's quickly get those up on screen. And then I'll ask each of you in half a minute each to give me your top priority for action over the next 5 years. So there we are, the keeping up with the change, building those bridges, why this moment matters so much. Let's take a look at the second one. Yeah, a little bit there about what StartNet is and what have been the important actions behind what it has done. Let's take a look at the third one. So really, that was László Andor in terms of what are the areas we need to focus on and what we need to be careful about as well. And the final one. So coming together, that phrase a lot of you have used throughout the discussion. Youth should be part of the change and not lectured but empowered. Life skills, not just when you're young, but lifelong learning. And we come back again to that empowerment, but in this time in the digital skills context. Chris, thank you so much for that so far. We'll take another look at Chris's work after we've had the breakout sessions. But before we go to those breakout sessions, and let me start in reverse order this time. So I'm going to start with Tommaso, then Paolo, then Natalia, give Vânia the last word for each of you. And I'm afraid you have half a minute each. If you, of all the issues we've discussed and all the things you want to see happen, had to identify a key priority action, and it can be a key priority for policymakers or for any of the stakeholders who need to be involved, what for each of you is your key priority for the coming 5 years? Talking 5-year terms, obviously, because we're moving into a new EU legislative cycle. Tommaso.
Yes, I'll repeat myself, and I would say finalize the proposed directive for quality traineeship, maybe also to improve it. Currently, there is no official ban on unpaid traineeships, and that is something that is definitely missing. And maybe also call for penalties on companies and employers that do not respect or infringe these rules.
Okay. I asked
and
for
that
one,
is
but
a
you
great
did 3
starting
in half
point.
a minute, so I'll allow
Yes.
it. Paolo.
I think that at the institutional level, I would ask for a real ecosystemic approach. Let's start working together, but really, it means that I expect our institutions working with the parliament, working with the commission, working with the companies or representative of companies to better address the challenges together. I think this is the way to address step by step all the challenges.
So that brings us back to our building bridges. And this time we're talking about building those bridges between the institutions. Natalia, your key priority.
I'm also going back to my first point, as I think, first of all, the work needs to be paid. So the unpaid internships are hardly not motivating for any young people, are gatekeeping the most vulnerable and disadvantaged young people. So to answer directly to the question, guaranteeing that internships and apprenticeships would be paid would be my top priority.
Thank you. And Vânia, you stressed the need at the beginning for that capacity to respond to rapid change, technological, economic and social. And we've heard a lot about the culture of work, the concept of work. For you, your top priority to address that challenge.
Yeah, for me, this is still the biggest one and the top priority to address. I would just echo Paolo, what he said is we need to come together. Countries need to come together with stakeholders, universities, companies, and of course, young people, and make sure that together we can find a way, not really, separate things, out of the blue, but a joint coalition, but this time that really can work and make sure Europe will keep up with the pace of technology and still have a very important voice in the world.
Thank you very much, Vânia. You bring us beautifully back to what StartNet has been all about that coming together to face common challenges, to share and inspire each other with best practices, what we learn about what works and what doesn't. And you're all going to delve into all of that a little bit more in the sessions that follow. We're going to take in a moment a 5-minute break. You'll have time to watch a little video that StartNet have put together for today and grab a coffee. And then you will be automatically redirected to the breakout groups that you registered for. And these breakout groups were designed to provide space for interaction, for networking, to explore some good practices and discuss remaining challenges. We had 4, just to remind you, addressing the skills mismatch through career guidance, youth participation for collective impact, skills for the green and digital transition, European learning mobility for the transition to work. And as I say, you will be automatically redirected during the break to your breakout. You'll be automatically redirected back to plenary, and please do come back and stay with us. We're going to have a very short session at the end, but just to hear very briefly from our rapporteurs about what you have been discussing. I'm going to have a chat with them and see what we can identify as key next steps back here. And as I say, in the next session, you will have the opportunity also, and we really will encourage you to speak as well as to write things and to engage in the conversation. But enjoy the 4-minute now coffee break, and let's also watch that video. Thank you, panel, for a wonderful discussion. So welcome back to those who've already joined. I'm just giving it another couple of seconds as people are still entering from the breakout rooms. So we don't have very long for this brief discussion on the outcome of your breakouts and on the key takeaways. Just to mention before we do that, that there is an evaluation survey. Be really good to get your feedback on today's event. We will be putting the link in the chat so you can do it during this session or you can wait until afterwards. You will also be sent the link by email afterwards if you prefer to focus on what we're discussing now. But there, the link is already there, so do fill it in if you can. We're also going to take a look in a few minutes at what Chris, our wonderful graphic artist, has been doing. But first, let me introduce the rapporteurs of the breakouts, all from the StartNet project. Delighted to welcome Perla Zanini, who is the rapporteur on addressing skills mismatch through careers guidance, Angelica Bartolomei, who was in the session on youth participation for collective impact, Vicky Buller, skills for the green and digital transitions, and Jan Vilka, who's back with us to tell us about the discussion on European learning mobility for transition to work. If we could get all of them up on screen with me together, that would be terrific. And as I say, I'll come back to see what we've got from Chris before we end this session. So, Perla, from your perspective, as I say, you were in the session on addressing skills mismatch through careers guidance. Could we get our rapporteurs up on the screen with me? That would be great, so I can see them properly. But Perla, if you can hear me, I can't see you at the moment. Can you just give me a sense first? We're talking a lot here about learning from inspiring examples. Were there any particular examples of successful ideas, practices you heard about in your session?
Yes, coming back also to what has previously been said about lifelong learning and lifelong guidance, we were talking about Alpha's, the organization Alpha, which is a regional organization of northern Italy, Liguria, and they are basically starting guidance already in primary school. So we cannot call it career guidance, but it is a guidance, and it's a way to ensure that young people and children and young people are made aware of what is labor market like and what their skills are.
And we've been talking, Paolo, a lot about the challenges that lie ahead. We've talked a lot about the progress that's been made, but how much is left to be done? When it comes to this particular area and the area of skills mismatch and the role of career guidance, what did speakers in your session identify as the key challenges if we are to make progress over the coming 5-year cycle?
Well, there are mainly two challenges that were identified. One is to work, the possibility, the need to work systematically together as a network, as networks of different institutions, of different stakeholders. So that was something that, for example, smaller organizations have more difficulties in doing. And it has been already said, we need to work together to tackle this. And this was something that some organizations are saying it's not so difficult, so easy to convince institutions and businesses and different stakeholders that this is feasible. And also even some institutions don't really believe in the need of guidance, of career guidance. And so it's also difficult to talk with them and convince them about the usefulness of doing these programs early on.
Really underlining the importance of that dialogue we've been talking about all the way through, if we are to really make progress, but also echoing those points made in our panel about an ecosystem approach and about the collective impact approach that you've all been working on through StartNet. Just a final, because I'm trying to build a sense of where we go from here. Were you able from the discussion to identify a clear priority for action among all those different challenges?
Yes, the priority is let's work together. It has been already said, and it's not so easy to implement it, but basically the fact that stakeholders of different compartments need to interact and talk with each other.
And indeed, I mean, we talk a lot about collaborative approaches and joined up thinking, easy to say, never as easy to do. But StartNet has shown some ways in which you can make that work. So we have something at least to build on there. Angelica, you were in the session on youth participation for collective impact. We heard very powerfully from Natalia about the importance of youth being at the core of this and being involved in all of these discussions in the centre. Did you hear some examples of how best to do that?
Yes, we had some example. One is sample from our own network, from the StartNet Italy network, who we created youth committee, StartNet Youth, very powerful. And they created their own reality, so now kind of youth association, and be kind of independent, still interconnected with the StartNet network. And this was a very good example of how you can involve young people directly in decision-making processes. Which reward themselves because they are beneficiaries.
Yeah, and in terms of the challenges to really make this work, was there a sort of consensus on the most important issues to address?
Yes, the first one was always funding. And well, it's a classical challenge, but funding, not even, because we know there are a lot of programs and there's a lot of financial possibilities, but the problem of the funding we have in this kind of process is to fund the process and not a project. So we need a more long-term funding, and even not only funding on spot, but even on offices, on teams that should be paid to do their work, even, and a long-term
So one of the things I know you've been working on in StartNet is that issue of capacity building, and really here the funding for that capacity building as important as the funding for specific initiatives here. Thank you very much. And was that, in terms of the clear priority for the future, was it really that issue of the longer term funding that was central, or is there another clear priority that you could identify?
Well, priority is always working together. Mine was even the collective impact session. So yes, of course, work together, give young people the possibility to be leaders of their own future, and co-leadership together with funding.
Thank you. Yeah, we've talked about co-creation, but co-leadership, equally important. Thank you so much, Angelica. Vicky Bulaf, you were in a session, we talked more about this in our plenary, the issue not so much of the green skills that are needed, the skills needed for the green transition, but we certainly talked a lot about the skills needed for the digital transition. Did you hear some great examples of what can be done in this area?
Yes, we actually had three to four good practices that have been presented from different countries, which were very interesting because they were all targeting different groups. So there was a very hands-on example from Berlin where youngsters really learn about their green and digital skills in a hands-on parcours. But also we had an example of targeting teachers and offering modules to teachers, because it's kind of a starting point to teach the teachers how to transmit the green and digital skills to the youngsters. And then we also had the topic of entrepreneurship in green and entrepreneurial skills, especially in rural areas in Spain. So we also have this social and inclusive aspect. So yeah, we had a very wide range of different good practices.
So again, echoing what was said in the plenary about it's not just about technical skills, it is also about those life skills and teaching the teachers. That's an interesting point that didn't come up so much in our earlier discussions. And you know where I'm going now. In terms of the challenges that lie ahead, was it clear? Was there a consensus on what they are?
So yeah, there was definitely the point of raising awareness about the topic in general, because there's a lack of knowledge not only with the youngsters but also with the teachers and educational system in general. So teachers are not prepared to, or educational systems are not prepared to teach these skills or empower youngsters about these skills. So this was one of the challenges, but also inclusion has been mentioned. So including rural areas, vulnerable youngsters. This was also a challenge that has been mentioned.
Thank you very much. And in terms of a clear priority for the future, was there one, or were there a multiple of priorities?
I think I'm going to repeat myself a little bit of what has already been said, because there was also best practice from Croatia, where high school students work together with companies, which then again leads to this systemic exchange of different actors that have to work together to make it successful. Only if there's like exchange and collaboration between different actors in the economic and educational sphere, I think this should be the priority, but it has been
Thank you very much. And that brings up that point that Jan made right at the beginning about the replicability, a word I always struggle to say, of many of these projects across member states, specific circumstances, specific environment, but nevertheless, they can be replicated and scaled up. Thank you so much. You're all doing a magnificent job in summarizing what I'm sure were very rich discussions. Jan, from you were in the session on European learning mobility for the transition to work. Again, a topic we touched on in the plenary. Inspiring ideas?
Lots of them. For example, from at the regional level, from ERLAL, the association that is working on lifelong learning and is running some initiatives on the mobility of apprenticeships. Paolo from FED mentioned some examples on inclusive mobility from Finland or the Basque Country. And Tommaso from the EPC mentioned Erasmus going green. That is also detailed in an EPC report. So a couple of initiatives that really make the most out of this learning mobility.
And in terms of the challenges ahead, was it clear what they are?
Yes, actually, mobility is much easier said than done, and there are a number of barriers, language barriers, administrative, legal barriers to overcome, and they make it even more difficult if you are already facing other challenges. To really make learning mobility possible for everyone, to make it more inclusive, it needs a lot of effort, preparation, resources to make it happen.
That word inclusiveness coming out in all of our conversations here. And were you able to identify a clear priority for action?
I think the echo of the discussion was really to look at what works at a small scale level and learning from there and making it happen at a broader scale, really scaling up good practices that are there and giving them the resources, the visibility, and facilitating partnerships across Europe.
Which brings us back very much to where you started in your opening presentation. So thank you for closing that circle for us. Chris, I don't know whether you are able, we are coming to the last couple of minutes of the event, to share what you have now. No, in that case, don't worry. They will be sent to you afterwards by email. You will receive all the graphics, and we do, as I said earlier, really encourage you to share those with your network so we can get that message out, use our multipliers as effectively as possible. The organisers will also share the outcomes of these discussions with the relevant European Commission Directorates General, so namely Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, and Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, and of course other relevant stakeholders, because I think the key message that came out throughout the afternoon was this issue of working together, breaking down those silos, having those dialogues, putting young people at the core of all those processes, to really building on all the principles that the StartNet project used to build the bridges that are in the title of this event and very much lay at the heart of their approach. As I mentioned, you will receive an email with the graphics. You will also receive, if you haven't clicked on the evaluation survey while we've been talking, you will receive it again by email. Please do fill it out. It is really helpful to the organisers to get your feedback. And you will also be sent a short report with some of the key takeaways, messages from today's event. So it only remains for me to thank all our speakers this afternoon very much indeed for their great contributions and the inspiration they have given us. Thank you to our rapporteurs for doing such a sterling job in summarising in a couple of minutes each what I'm sure were very rich discussions. Thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon and taking part in those conversations. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacki. Thank you, everyone.